Amy, let me tell you about a magical place that is so exactly designed to be enclosed space, year-round fun for the whole family that I bet you already know what I'm going to say before I even say the name. Let's say it together on 3. 1, 2, 3. Great Wolf Lodge. You got it, Amy.
My kids loved Great Wolf Lodge when we went. You probably already know that it has a huge indoor water park with a wave pool, lazy river, a bunch of massive water slides. But then your pack can hit the other attractions because wait, there's more.
Great Wolf Lodge has adventure-packed attractions like Magi Quest, a live-action game kids can play throughout the lodge, plus the Northern Lights Arcade. Spent some quality time there, so your kid who loves the lazy river and your kid who loves fantasy games will both have a great time.
Great Wolf Lodge also offers great dining options and complimentary daily events like nightly dance parties, all under one roof. Unpack the car once and you're settled in to have fun. And with 22 lodges across the country, you're always a short drive away from adventure.
We've both had such great times at Great Wolf Lodge, so bring your pack together at a lodge near you. Learn more at greatwolf.com and strengthen the pack. Hello and welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Margaret, and today I'm talking to Amy Shoenthal. She is a journalist, marketing consultant, and a contributor to Forbes Women and Harvard Business Review, where she shines a spotlight on leaders who have been historically underestimated, yet are doing the work to solve society's biggest problems. I am talking to Amy today about her new book, The Setback Cycle. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, setbacks, we all have them. They're coming for us. We don't opt into setbacks. What made setbacks for you a topic that you wanted to kind of explore in depth in this book?
It actually took me a while to land on the concept of setbacks as I was coming up with the framework for this book. I knew through all of my interviewing celebrities, senators, business people, leaders, executives, that in almost every telling of their career journey, of their life journey, whatever led them to the really amazing thing that they are lauded for, celebrated for, it seemed like the part of their story that really lit them up and got them excited to start really talking about it and getting into it was when they lifted themselves up after a setback. And I noticed that it wasn't always a mistake they made. So it wasn't all categorized as learning from our mistakes, which is a concept we all know. And it wasn't always some big dramatic trauma. So it couldn't really be categorized under post-traumatic growth, which is another concept that people are somewhat familiar with. And so as I kept talking to people and as I started trying to understand what this common theme was that I was seeing, I talked to psychologists and neuroscientists and coaches. And when I looked up the definition of a setback, I saw that the truest definition of it is a reversal or check in progress. And that was it, because every story had someone working towards something, moving forward, thinking they're on a path that's going to get them to point B, whatever that point B is, and they were unexpectedly bumped backwards and had to find a new path. And it always seemed that that new path led them to somewhere much more rewarding, much more interesting, and depending on your definition of success, much more successful than where they were originally headed. And so I wanted to know, why does this happen? How can I learn from it? And how can I explain it to others in a way that they can learn from it so that we can all be armed with the tools we need to work through our next inevitable setback?
You kind of touched on my next question, the definition of a setback. I have that note right here, a reversal or check of progress. I think that's helpful when we start. What are we really talking about? But is there a scope that makes something a setback? Like, is there a difference between, let's say, like a bump in the road and a setback or a real tragedy and a setback? Is there a sweet spot where that this applies to? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe some things are so profound that they kind of knock us permanently off the path. And then some things are so small that we don't even register. Like, what is the fat part of the bell curve for the setback that you're defining in this book?
Of course, there's a spectrum of setbacks. Some are the really small everyday setbacks. And if you're a mom, like I know many of your listeners are,
it's really a life of setbacks, people.
It's a life of setbacks that we have, for the most part, chosen. And
right.
A lot of us just think about getting your kid, if you have a young child or a teenager, right, out the door in the morning to school. You go through at least 5 setbacks a day doing that.
Right.
But
right.
There are also other things that come up in our lives that are not setbacks. They are just sad moments, difficult moments, but they're not, again, if you go back to the true definition of setbacks, they might not be things that bump us backwards. They might be obstacles that you overcome. It might be, a loss, a death of someone. That doesn't necessarily classify as a setback. That's just a horrible, painful experience. It could be a setback. And that's the thing. Like, there's really no...
It's wrapped up together. But that does make sense that the setback involves truly like a step backwards. You were heading towards something and you're not just going through like the forest on the way there, which is hard. You're actually having to maybe go back and take a different route forward. We love a metaphor. It helps us understand stuff. Yeah.
We love a visual. We love a visual so that we can understand a concept. And that can be the case for a marriage, when you unexpectedly end a relationship. All of those things you were, maybe it doesn't feel like you're working towards something, but all those future life moments that you pictured as a family unit, that all disappears. And that definitely feels like a setback.
For sure. And you need to find a new path. Yeah.
Exactly. And for others, it feels like relief and freedom. So it's really someone's setback might be your celebration. What I classify as a setback for me might not be a setback at all for you.
Right. Right. And you don't always know. I quote, my father has an expression, never judge a crossroads. Like, you don't always know. A setback is, I guess, probably feels negative in the immediate, but in the long term, what you find in the book is that for a lot of people, it turned out to be kind of the galvanizing moment for where they were headed. But probably in the immediate, you are going to experience a setback as a negative feeling.
Exactly. And unfortunately, I do not have a way in the book for you to skip over the annoying feeling. Actually, that I encourage people to embrace that feeling, because the second phase of the cycle is embrace.
Well, let's dial in on that first and kind of nerd out on the science for a minute, because we have talked about this on the podcast before, how your brain learns more from setbacks than from successes sometimes. So can you talk about that? Because I think we always say on the podcast, we don't do things because the book told us it would make us better parents. We do things because they actually work. And this, I think, is an example of, it's not just kind of the pablum of everything happens for a reason and this was part of the divine plan. This is actual science.
That's right. And I think in the intro of the book, I clarify that this book is not any sort of everything happens for a reason.
Right. We've thrown that phrase out the window long ago.
Yeah. We're just acknowledging that setbacks are inevitable. And now we have tools to navigate these life experiences that are pretty universal. So your question was about the neuroscience of setbacks.
A neuroscience, yeah.
So Shoenthal Pratt is a neuroscientist she wrote a book called The Neuroscience of You, and it is fascinating for anyone wanting to go really deep into this topic. But what she told me about setbacks is that she was able to prove in her lab that people who have gone through setbacks are better at reasoning, learning, and problem solving. It makes sense if you really think about it, because when things are going very well, you're not really taking the time to think about how you could do things differently. But when things start to go off the rails or bump you backwards, that's when you start to get creative and use the muscles in your brain that you need for problem solving, reasoning, creativity, innovation, all of that. And every time you experience a setback, your brain actually rewires itself because it's absorbing new information that it's going to use to direct your future actions. So if you want me to really go into it, there's a part of your brain called the basal ganglia, And that's the command center. And that's where the brain stores learning and reasoning. Everyone knows what a dopamine dip and a dopamine hit is. So our dopamine levels go up and down depending on the atmosphere and the environment around us. And so when we have a negative experience, we have a dopamine dip. That's when we feel sad, we feel uncomfortable. We do not like those. Our brain wants us to always move towards an experience that it thinks will be rewarding and away from these negative experiences. You're always chasing the dopamine hits and avoiding the dips. But it is in those dips where our brain actually changes, absorbs information, and grows and evolves. And that's why if anyone's been through any therapy or, CBT, you have likely heard someone say, embrace the discomfort, feel the feelings, all the stuff. And that's why, because we learn from the dips.
Yeah. And you have an interesting thought about how babies do this and what we can learn from babies. Since we spend so much time with them, people, we might as well be learning something from them. I am talking to Amy Shoenthal. She is the author of The Setback Cycle, and we'll be right back.
Hellions, it's time for some spring cleaning, and I don't just mean the coat closets. Doing your financial spring cleaning can actually be super easy when you let Monarch do your financial spring cleaning for you. One dashboard that gets your entire financial life organized. No more clutter, no more mess, no more logins scattered everywhere, just accounts, investments, property, and more, all in one place. Get your first year of Monarch for half off, just $50 with promo code FRESH. Monarch allows you to look not only at what you've already spent, but also to plan for the future. With Monarch, you can set savings goals, plan for big purchases, and notice spending trends before they become a problem. I can generate cash flow reports that show me what we spent this quarter, this month, what we're probably going to spend next month, and feel prepared, organized, and knowing how to plan for the future. No more surprises and a lot more clarity. Try Monarch. Use code FRESH at monarch.com to get your first year half off at just $50. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code FRESH. My favorite skincare products actually feel more like self-care, like they're so nice to put on and they smell so good that I'm actually happy when I get to that part of my day. And I swear that is how I feel about Osea's anti-aging body balm.
Amy, you are usually the lotions and potions queen on this podcast, but I have to say, hard agree.
Osea's anti-aging body balm is a liquid silk body balm that combines the lasting hydration of a lotion with the firming power of a serum, leaving skin smoother and firmer.
This body balm is clinically tested and designed to deliver visible results you can see and feel.
So we've gotten to use this product for a couple of months now, and I swear I have really noticed firmer and smoother skin, like on the back of my hands. It's like getting a mini spa treatment from head to toe.
Get a spring-worthy glow with clean, clinically tested skincare from Osea. And right now, we have a special discount just for our listeners.
Get 10% off your first order site-wide with code FRESH at OseaMalibu.com.
That's 10% off your first order with code FRESH at OSEAMalibu.com. So we were talking about how our brain learns from, shall we say, negative experiences, setbacks, kind of the touching the hot stove. Okay, I don't want to do that again. That's really going to be imprinted on your brain. And you use the example of how babies learn this way. And I guess that makes sense, right? Like babies' experience of the world, and kids learn this way too, to a large degree. And I think sometimes we struggle with, I used to put my baby's hands in those little baby mittens, because you don't want them to scratch their face.
Yeah.
And my pediatrician was like, take those mittens off. That's how they learn not to scratch their face, by scratching their face. And you get it. Nobody wants to see their baby with scratches. But the idea that they learn through negative experiences is interesting, and it's also kind of comforting.
It is. But to babies, everything is new. Everything is new. Everything is uncomfortable. Everything is exploration and curiosity and trying new things and failing. The reason I talk about how babies operate, I actually got this from the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. She's the one who coined the term the growth mindset.
Yes, we've talked a lot about growth mindset on this podcast.
Yes, you have. Exactly. And so we know how easy it is to get caught up in a fixed mindset, which is things are as they are. I cannot change. I am good at this. I am bad at this. And you kind of see this as a binary, or like, I scored this in math on my SATs and I scored this in language. And so I am good at this and I am not good at this. You get caught up into these things and you think the outcomes are just fixed. The growth mindset teaches you that you can change those outcomes. If you, and everything, this is another piece of wisdom that I got from my friend Shoenthal, the neuroscientist, everything comes back to motivation. How motivated are you to learn? I am really bad at folding laundry. I could get better at it.
Same.
Yeah, I could get better at it. My husband's really good at it. You know why? He cares to fold his laundry properly and nicely so that it all looks good in his drawers and it's all neat and nice. And I could get better at it, but I am not motivated to. I don't care if my laundry is a little sloppily folded. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I'm bad at this. He's good at this. I could change, but I'm not motivated to. I am, but I always did much better in writing than in science in school. But I was so fascinated by this neuroscience that I dove into it and I learned it. You know what I mean? You can change your outcome if you adopt a growth mindset. I think people use the term growth mindset without like fully understanding what it is,
Yeah, we've had a lot of debates about growth mindset because I think sometimes it gets thrown around as kind of like another thing you're failing at if your kids don't have a growth mindset.
Exactly.
And I think people have set points of growth mindset that are not as malleable as we think, but I think that's right. That you don't take it as like you have to have a growth mindset about math. And so let's make that happen. It might be very impossible for someone who's never going to be motivated at math.
Yes, it totally depends on your motivation. You could have a growth mindset in one area and not another. Like I have a growth mindset in a lot of areas of my life, but not in folding laundry.
And you never will. And for that, we salute you. We salute you.
I never will. And I will fold my laundry and it will not be good. And you know what? I will never fold my husband's laundry.
Yeah, that's how I am too. My husband's an engineer. He likes the sharp creases. I'm like, you do it. Here's your t-shirt pile, kid.
Yep. And that is fine. There is a lot of advantages to being bad at folding laundry.
Works just fine.
Yep.
So in the book, you set up a 4-phase framework for handling setbacks. So let's start walking through, because there's something that we talk again a lot on the podcast here. So what's the first phase?
Establish. Knowing and acknowledging that you are in a setback is not as easy as everyone thinks it is.
It's the hardest. Acknowledging the truth, we often talk about this, is the hardest part of everything, because it feels sometimes better to like run faster on the hamster wheel and be like, no, nothing's wrong with my marriage, nothing's wrong with my kids, everything's fine, I don't care, I don't miss my dream of being a blah blah blah. Like this phase of seeing things for the truth, so much harder than we think.
So much harder. I mean, you think a setback is, oh, I lost my job, oh, investor pulled out of my business. Like those are the clear setbacks that are very obvious, but more often than not, we are working through setbacks that we are completely unaware of. That's why I have little exercises throughout the book to help you work through the cycle. And one of the things I have in Establish is an alarm clock checklist, and it's meant to wake you up if you think you are sleepwalking through a setback.
Yes, we talked to Dr. Lynetta Willis, who has this concept called stable misery that kind of affects a lot of parents. And I think that a lot of it comes from a lack that you are in a mode often as a parent. You're in a partnership that like you don't really have time to tend. You've got kids who need something constantly every day, and that we miss this step that you talk about really clearly in the book of really taking hard looks at things. And you don't really want to miss 10 years of your life through the busyness of having children. And I think these kind of exercises that you lay out of really working to be an active participant in what's going on in your life, because you can't start fixing a setback if you don't acknowledge that it happens.
If you ignore it, you're just delaying it.
Yes. That's it too. It doesn't even work. That's the bigger problem. Like if it worked, I'd be like, fine, just keep running on the hamster wheel and ignoring all your problems, but it's going to be waiting for you somewhere.
But on the other hand, so many of us aren't ready to acknowledge that we're in a setback, and we do need to give ourselves grace. And even if you acknowledge it and you recognize that I'm going to have to do this one day, it's okay to say, but not today. Just don't do that perpetually for 10 years feels like too long, just make sure you do it one day.
Right. That can be very freeing too, is to say, okay, I'm going to really have to figure this out, but this is not the week or the month for it. But acknowledging it is still powerful.
Exactly. I always knew I was going to start my own business. I always knew I was going to age out of the marketing industry over 40, because unfortunately that is the case for most women, especially mothers. And yet I still hung on to my full-time job for as long as I could because it suited me and I benefited from it, even though I knew it was not going to be my long-term plan.
And you talk about that experience, and we'll come back to the framework, but you talk about that in the book, that what happened with your motherhood journey, and you talk about the motherhood penalty. So let's just click on that for a minute before we go back to the framework.
The motherhood penalty, I don't know if it was coined by Claire Kane Miller, who writes for the New York Times. She writes about parenthood and, the culture of motherhood and society's expectations and perceptions of mothers. But it was in an article, I think, in like the 90s or early 2000s, where the motherhood penalty was coined. And that refers to the loss of wages that a mother in the workforce experiences once she becomes a mother. And everyone talks about the gender pay gap and how women are paid, I forget what it is now, 76 cents on the dollar as compared to men in the workforce. But the gap is more like an ocean when it comes to moms and non-moms, whether it's a woman or a man. Again, I forget the math, but it might be like 56 cents on the dollar. And then forget it once you go down the scale of marginalized communities, because if you're not white, if you're not cisgender, forget it. It just goes, it is an ocean, not a gap.
Farther and farther down. And that's another setback point that we can think about and acknowledge and figure out through the framework how to come back from, I guess.
Exactly. I mean, that goes back to one thing in your life could be a setback, while another thing in your life could be a celebration. Having a child, for most people, is an intentional decision and worthy of celebration. Incredible personal milestone. You're so happy. And at the same time, it often results in a career setback.
For sure. And marital happiness setback and sleep setback. I mean, a lot of setbacks can be wound up in a positive thing that you actually wanted. And I think part of that is also the acknowledgement of, okay, everything doesn't have to be. I always used to say when I had younger kids, when we were doing the podcast, the people who are and look at the baby comes down the rainbow into your arms and it's that's not my experience. Maybe it's somebody's. I am talking to Amy Shoenthal, and she is the author of The Setback Cycle. And we're going to return and walk through this framework when we get back after this break.
All my kids learned to swim when they were little. It was super important to me that they be confident and safe in the water. There was only one problem with that: taking them to swim lessons. I mean, the pools were freezing. There were always cranky adults doing laps right there. And it was definitely not, for any of us, what you would call fun.
Amy, heard. But now there's Goldfish Swim School. Goldfish takes a really thoughtful approach to swim lessons, combining research-based teaching with a warm, kid-friendly environment that actually helps kids thrive in the water.
Every detail at Goldfish is thoughtfully designed to create a golden experience, from shiver-free, warm indoor pools to comfy waiting areas for parents to professionally trained lifeguards on deck.
Goldfish uses an approach called the science of swim play, which combines guided play with proven teaching techniques to help kids learn to swim, build water safety skills, and gain confidence, all at their own pace. Lessons are designed to meet kids exactly where they're at.
If you've been thinking about swim lessons or just wondering where to start, this is a great opportunity. Right now, Goldfish Swim School is offering a waived membership plus your child's first lesson free at participating locations.
Just visit goldfishswimschool.com/free to find a location near you and enroll using promo code FREE.
That's goldfishswimschool.com/free, promo code FREE.
Amy, when I'm having a good hair day, it usually makes my whole day better. And that's why on every day, I'm taking Nutrafol.
Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, and it's the #1 hair growth supplement brand personally used by dermatologists. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements are peer-reviewed, NSF certified for sport, and clinically tested.
Nutrafol offers multiple formulas for men and women tailored to different life stages and lifestyle factors, so you get support that's actually right for you. Adding Nutrafol to your daily routine is easy. Order online, no prescription needed, with automated deliveries and free shipping to keep you on track.
Let your hair be one less thing to worry about. See visibly thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair in 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol.
For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you visit Nutrafol.com and enter promo code LAUGHING.
That's Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code LAUGHING.
Okay, so we talked about establish. That's the first part of the 4.
There's a lot there.
A lot there. How did I get here? Really asking questions, right? And you have exercises in the book about really how to examine this phase. And then we move on to the second phase, which is embrace.
This is the most difficult phase. This is the part where you stop ignoring your setback and you stop running away from it and you sit down and you embrace the discomfort. Part of this phase is working through the stress response. Everyone thinks of the stress response as fight or flight, but there's actually a third option. You freeze. You do not know whether to keep going, to move forward, to, retreat, and you are just frozen.
I'm a freezer, big time freezer.
We all are, of course. You're sort of, decisions are hard. Decisions are hard no matter what. And you're always afraid you're making the wrong one. And that's what causes so many of us to freeze. And I have a part of the book that says, here's how to thaw yourself out if you're stuck in a freeze. And so many of us, as we're floating along in our setback, we don't want to ask the hard questions, but this is the phase where you have to ask the hard questions because that's where you're going to get the information. This is where the growth happens. This is the dopamine dip that we talked about. This is the dip. So let's figure out why it's a dip. Yeah, I lost my job, but it wasn't just about the finances and the health insurance and whatever other logistical things you want to list. It's about my loss of identity.
My identity, right.
My self-doubt that creeps up. Was I really caught up in a round of layoffs or did they really just not value me? And this was an excuse, did I do this thing wrong? Should I have done this better? You have to really dig to get the clues because those clues are going to help you chart the next path forward. We have to get really introspective here.
I think especially for women and maybe especially for moms in the communities that are close, which can be great for us and give us a lot of support. You talk a lot about the shame in this part of the cycle. And I think for a lot of women, we still sort of carry the thing of, well, I'm trying something that is outside of being this wife and mother, and then failing at it just feels, even to say failing at it, having a setback within it can sometimes feel like, what was I even doing in the first place?
Yeah. Like, you either fall into a cycle of blame or a spiral of shame. You're either shaming yourself for not being better, doing better, working harder, foreseeing this happening. You're either shaming yourself or you're blaming someone else. Well, if that person hadn't done that, I wouldn't be in this position. And it is so easy when you are in a setback to cast blame and think that this is totally someone else's fault, or shame yourself and think it is totally your fault and it would have been preventable if you had just done one thing differently. And guess what? It is always somewhere in between.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. And I also think that we have to sit with other people's blaming of us. There are a lot of people who like it when people fail. And I mean, I've been guilty of this, with like someone who I'm like, oh, look at how well they're doing. And then if it goes badly for them, I can get a little jolt of like, well, I guess I'm not so bad. Look at they stink. Like giving that energy out. And we accept it too, that I've been an entertainer for most of my life. So I've certainly had a lot of experiences of being out there and failing pretty spectacularly. And I think it's just painful. And we do have to accept whether it's maybe an in-law or a sister or somebody who's looking at us and saying like, hey, I'm getting a little joy from your failure. It's a really hard part, this embracing. Because we don't really want to embrace it. And our brain is telling us like, run from the pain.
Totally. And no one's harder on ourselves than our inner critic. And maybe your inner critic, you have to visualize who is that inner critic? What do they look like? Who are they? Maybe it's based on that in-law. Maybe it's based on that neighbor or whoever is like, you think is criticizing you most harshly, and maybe they really are. And if you visualize that inner critic, you can disarm them. You can absolutely disarm them. This is not just like woo-woo fun activities. This is a proven psychological concept. Give them a name, give them a face, give them a whole personality. My inner critic, her name is Roz.
I liked this idea. Yes.
Yeah. Her name is Roz. She's like, I'm from Long Island, and I just have this vision of like my friend's mom standing on the stoop or like smoking a cigarette and being like, get back in the backyard. Don't ride your bike too far away. Come on, get in the backyard. And I don't know why that's me. That's my inner critic. Like, don't go write a book. You should just be like sitting here in the backyard. I don't know why. But who's your inner critic? Name them. Give them a whole persona, because then when it comes, again, in the form of someone else, in the form of your own inner dialogue, you can disarm them.
Then we get to step 3, which is explore.
This is the best phase.
I like it. And it centers a lot around curiosity, which is a word we've used in a lot of contexts. And I think it can be really helpful, like the idea of curiosity and what that looks like.
Oh, yeah. And we go into big C curiosity. This isn't just like, oh, I'm curious about that thing I read about in an article. This is like, no, I liked playing team sports as a kid, not just because I liked kicking a ball around a field, but because of the camaraderie and the leadership skills that I developed and the friends I made and feeling part of something that was beyond just me as an individual. You know, this is where we get really deep. I like to tell people to go into their idealistic selves and think about what they would do. You know, what would you do if money was no object?
That's what I was just with a group of youngs, and they were telling me about, you know, they're all graduating and what's next. And I kept asking people, because someone asked me, and I thought it was such a good question. What would it look like if you could write it? You could write it with no obstacles. Like, what would you do with this, you know, interesting thing that you speak this language and you have this medical degree and you're interested in journalism? Like, what would that look like if you could imagine the best case scenario?
That's so good. Yeah, exactly. Like, how good could it possibly get? Think about that. And that's okay. Then take that idealistic version of what you want to do. And how can you bring elements of that? Obviously not the whole thing. I want to be, you know, a pop star. Sure, you probably can't be a pop star. I mean, maybe you can, but can you go to an open mic night? Like, I don't know. Can you take a voice lesson? Because there's going to be something in that. And you're like, oh my God, I just got fired from my job. Why are you telling me to take a voice lesson? You are going to learn something about yourself if you explore your deep-rooted curiosity. No matter what, there is always something to gain. There's a quote in the book from Norma Kamali. She's a fashion designer. She's incredible. And she was one of the most fascinating people I've ever interviewed. And she has this great quote. And she said to me, if you want to do something, go out and do it boldly, and you will be so amazed by how capable you are. And that is the point of the explore phase, to imagine how good it can get. And that's what leads you to get clarity on the path forward and how we cycle into the last phase of the setback cycle, emerge.
Mm-hmm. And this is taking action and figuring out what's next. And I love the concept of the North Star that you talk about. So how does that work?
Once you have gone through the entire setback cycle and you've realized a little bit more about what's important to you, what you want to take from that experience and what you want to kind of throw away, it's a really good moment to get clear on your values and your North Star. Your North Star is really what drives everything you do. I know so many people, so many women, so many mothers who run their own business, and they have a picture of their kids on the wall next to them because they're doing all this work so that they can create comfort for their family, provide for their family, hopefully create generational wealth for their children. And that is what drives everything they do. That's why they deal with the invoicing and the accounting and all the mundanity that it takes to run a business, because they're doing it for their children. And so what's your North Star? The woman I talk about in the North Star chapter, which I believe is the last chapter of the book, her name is Kate Luzio. She created a company called Luminary, which is a professional networking and development company for women at all stages of their careers. And her North Star, she had a almost 2-decade career in banking where she saw the difference in opportunities for women and men. And she just wanted to mentor women and give them access to all the things that she saw in terms of, you know, how much they could be capable of. if they just were given the right opportunities and access that she felt, she had to search for and fight for, but she was able to do it. And she wanted to extend that to the women she saw struggling. She does that in Luminary. Her North Star is creating advancement and opportunity for women in the workforce at every stage, at every phase of their career, whether you are in the corporate world or an entrepreneur or deciding what to do somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm. And the book is full of anecdotes and kind of case studies of people dealing with these kind of setbacks. Lots of strong, powerful women who've had these kind of setbacks. Talk about a few of the other people you talk about. How did you find these people? What drove you to the really wide range of people you profile in the book?
I found them mostly because I had either written about them or interviewed them for Forbes or Harvard Business Review throughout the course of my writing career. The folks who I wrote about in the book, so many of them are moms. So many of them are addressing the motherhood penalty, the caregiver crisis. We have Reshma Saujani, who she actually created Girls Who Code, which aims to bridge the gender gap in STEM education. But then when the pandemic hit and she, along with so many other moms, found themselves toggling between work and remote learning for their young children, she really saw firsthand how our society places very little value on the labor of mothers and how unpaid work of mothers is the economy's safety net. And so she created an organization called Moms First, which is aiming to advocate for legislation at the federal and local government level to try to get some legislation passed that would better protect and acknowledge this labor of mothers that often goes so unseen and undervalued.
And there's so much that's universal in this book, but as we focus here on motherhood, what do moms have to take from this work for, I think not just for themselves, I think that part is clear, but I think there's a lot to take away for our kids and maybe especially our daughters about how we teach them about how to approach the problems that they deal with, either on a social level, school level, rejection from college, all sorts of things that our kids are going to face.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much in this book that's appropriate for kids. It's not just a book for adults. Mm-hmm. This framework is for anyone at any age. And you can take the framework, and if you understand the psychology behind it and why it works and some of these exercises and some of the probing questions that are going to get you through your setback, you can absolutely use them to help your kids through their setbacks. Why did not getting into college impact you so much? What's something, you're in a really low moment. What's something that you really enjoy that can go light you up? What is your North Star? All of the things, how do you adopt a growth mindset? All of these things we've talked about today, totally applicable to raising kids with resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you have those frameworks, sometimes we get lost in those conversations. It's okay. Things happen for a reason. Oh, this doesn't matter. That we start saying things that are kind of actively unhelpful. And that when you have a book like this with a system, it can be really helpful to say, oh, this is a setback. Let me help run through these steps and then give the gift to my child to say, you can use this throughout your life. These are 4 steps when you hit a step back.
Exactly. We have scripts for you.
Yes, here we go. We've solved it, as we always do on this podcast. No more problems for anybody.
Totally.
So, Amy, tell us where our listeners can find more of your writing and your work and where they can find the book.
I have a website, thesetbackcycle.com. And that gives you everything you need to know about the book, along with a list of retailers. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble, Target, your local bookstore, bookshop.org, and of course, Amazon. And my writing is also on that website. If you poke around, I try to keep it up to date with my latest articles. And you can also find me on Instagram at Amy Shoe and LinkedIn.
Awesome. We will link to all of those places in the show notes, as always. And Amy, thanks so much for talking to me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
The book is The Setback Cycle, out now. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.